Enjoy with your headphones for a better listening experience.
Please watch till the end of the video to have the most scariest part of the story.
Bill Gates said, "I will always choose a lazy person to do a difficult job because a lazy person will find an easy way to do it." What's a real-life example of this? I was working as a stockboy in a supermarket, and when we had to fill the milk cooler, people would bust open 12 packs of milk cartons and put them in one by one. On my first day, I just placed the 12-pack in the cooler and cut the plastic off on one side with my box cutter and yanked it from under it, and the look of the store manager and the other employee who was training me was pure bewilderment. From that day, everyone did it my way. Start of lockdown, my 9-year-old son was having worksheets emailed to complete at home. One day, left him at the laptop doing his maths while I made some dinner with my 3-year-old daughter. Walked into the living room with his dinner to find him asking Alexa all of his maths questions. Worked as a laborer at a nursery one summer. Daily tasks included manually watering 15,000 plants each day. Put together a back-of-the-napkin plan to build an irrigation system and spent the next few weeks building it with some money from the boss. That system is still running 15 years later and does all the work now. I did automate myself out of the job and had to find another eventually. A couple of years later, got my engineering degree. I'm convinced engineers are inherently lazy people that will spend a disproportionate effort to make things easier. My brother-in-law spent a whole summer trying to figure out how to fix his sagging deck at the lake, which he could in theory crawl under and jack it up. It would have been a tunneling project. It's a 60 by 60 area, all long 2 by 6 boards. Massive. I sat there long enough with enough beers in me to come up with the idea of just cutting a square out of the sagging area about 3 foot x 3 feet, jacking it up, then re-screwing down the boards. He paints the thing every spring with a roller anyhow, so it's not like the square cut shows up. He thought I was a genius. I was just lazy. We had to hold a thermometer in water in chemistry class. It probably was only a 20-minute experiment, but your arms get tired after a couple minutes and you can't let the thermometer touch the bottom of the pan or it won't get an accurate reading. So instead of sucking it up and just holding the thermometer, my lab partner built a contraption out of lab books and paper clips to somehow hold the thermometer in the water without it touching bottom. It was the stupidest looking thing you would ever see in a lab class, and our professor even walked over and said, "If it looks stupid, sounds stupid, but it works, then it isn't stupid." My lab partner and I joke that he wasn't talking about the contraption but the intellect of my lab partner. I had a math teacher that actively encouraged his students to be as lazy as possible, defining lazy as actively searching for ways to do as minimal work as possible. His logic was that the way math is now, it could always be simplified and still work the same, someone just needs to be lazy enough to find that. I was a paid intern at a large company for one summer back home from college. My work 95% consisted of using SAP, importing to Excel, cleaning data, and generating reports, occasionally creating some tool someone needed. In the first 2 weeks after getting the hang of my responsibilities, writing all the Excel formulas needed, and basically automating 99% of my work, I was chilling. I went from actually working from 9 to 5 to maybe 1 hour tops a day. Finding, importing, cleaning, and reporting usually took hours, but with all the formulas it took 2 minutes of clicking. I then helped the other cool intern get his setup so we could both just chill. We could take 2-hour lunches, paid for by the company, and nobody said anything because we were just getting so much more done than the other interns. OFC, I helped with special tasks when asked, but those were simple 20-minute tasks building something in Excel. Overall, was the easiest/stressless internship of my life. One of my favorite examples is Andy Kim. And I'd like to preface this by saying that I don't think Kim is lazy so much as a genius. Andrew Joachim was a singer-songwriter who became famous under the stage name Andy Kim. He achieved success writing songs for bands like the Archies, possibly most notably Sugar, Sugar. After his success, he coasted for a while until his record label dropped him for lack of output. At that point he created his own label and cranked out hits like Rock Me Gently. When they saw this, the big record labels then bought his label under the assumption that they would then profit from the songs he wrote and performed. He then very shortly stopped writing songs and largely lived off the sale of his label. Work smarter, not harder. It took me like 3 months, but I automated a data pipeline to extract data, clean it up, and spit it out in an Excel or PDF format to one of our clients. I walked over to shoot it with the lady who handles my client and gives me tasks, and she told me we make $40K off them every month for that automated job. I need to go start my own business. When Carl Friedrich Gauss, the famous German mathematician and physicist, was in elementary school, around 1784, his class was assigned the busy work task of adding all the numbers from 1 to 100, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, and so on. This usually kept the class quiet for half an hour or so. 7-year-old Carl was sitting quietly with the correct answer, 50-50, while the rest of the class was just starting, so the surprised teacher asked him how he came up with the solution. He replied that he added 1 and 100 and got 101. Then he added 2 and 99, and got 101, 3 plus 98 is equal to 101, and so on. He realized there was a pattern of 50 pairs of numbers with each pair adding up to 101. And 50 times 101 is equal to 5050. When I was in college, I had a job at an Italian fast food place with a reputation for its breadsticks. They came in frozen and needed a bit to thaw, so we'd take a giant 3 by 4 foot aluminum baking sheet, spread them out in a single layer with no spaces and cover it with a plastic bag, then leave it sit in the walk-in overnight. The next day you'd have to get a pair of tongs and move each stick to a new tray, turning them over, then cover the new tray with the bag and let them sit on racks for a couple of hours before brushing on the garlic butter sauce. This was tedious enough that you'd usually be ready to brush the butter on the first tray as soon as you turned the last tray. I was given this task for the first time one morning and just did not want to deal with it. I realized if I put the second tray upside down on top of the first one then turned it over and took the first tray out, I got exactly the same results. Blew the boss's mind when I did the 3-hour job in about 15 minutes. I was once set to test a certain piece of equipment on a ship. The test involved attaching the unit to a reader, then running loads of command line commands. Then, one would have to make a copy of all the text, copy it into Word and save it as a real crappy looking report. There were hundreds of units, and they needed to be tested several times a year. We did about 20 to 30 a day. It would take several weeks to finish. I didn't know coding at the time, but always wanted to learn it. Within 2 months, I had made a program, even with a GUI, to spot faults with ease, instead of having to actually read the reports. The program could read 3 units at a time and would automatically create a smooth PDF report and save it on our server, named with serial number and date. The job was now to attach 3 units, then wait for about 3 minutes, detach, and attach new ones. Basically 30 seconds work, 3 minutes break. I could now test all units in a day, though I would typically spread it out over a couple more days. When I left the company, I left the program on the test computer. I got an email from an ex-colleague a few months later, saying they were using the program on several ships now. There wasn't any manual for the program, of course, but it was so straightforward that it wasn't needed. An older company had a person dedicated to data entry which boiled down to copying and pasting portions of data from text files into spreadsheet and formatting into a report. The person originally doing this job spent a full 40+ hours/week doing it but was not very computer literate. When they retired, the company hired someone with actual skills. The new hire convinced management to let her work remotely after getting up to speed on the job. The first week at home was spent automating the entire job. The remainder of their multi-year tenure with the company was spent doing whatever they wanted to save the 10 to 15 minutes weekly to run their program and to answer the odd email here and there. All while getting paid full salary and benefits. They actually had to add in a few errors now and then to make it seem realistic. Worked in a local adult education center. One of my main tasks was to make calculation about how many people enlisted for a course, how many of them got discounts, unemployed e.g., how many men/women/ages etc. That was needed to calculate upcoming courses fees etc. That was my only work there and I hated it. This was in the early 90s, so PCs were a thing in our offices, but I had no idea how to write a program or use a database to use this information. Lucky as I am, our center had an interesting policy: when you want to educate yourself, you can attend that class for free. And when it's during work time, then this is work time, as long as my supervisor is okay with that. She was. So, I spent 3 months studying database structures, scripting, coding, etc. I told my tutor what I want to do and he helped me to write a script that grabs all necessary information from the course's database, copy that into another database, and then I went crazy and wrote code that was insane. I implemented what-if scenarios thanks to filters. At the end I was able to do my work, that needed 6 hours a day within 15 minutes. I mean, before that it took example an hour to have all the necessary information to have a how many unemployed single-parent women does it need to make the costs of that course even. I had everything back then. Now you want statistics, how many single parents, disabled foreign women at the age of 80 to 90 are needed for the next 2 years to keep the ornithology course running? Sure, no problem. Clickety-click, done. After that, I started the PC in the morning, grabbed all the data, ran my script, was done within 15 minutes and then read the book I brought from home. At the end of the day, I gave my supervisor several dozens of papers, statistics, predictions, etc. and said, that was a lot of work, and went home. My supervisor was super happy with me because I did so much more now and was super effective. I worked goods in for an aircraft manufacturer as a summer job at university. Parts would arrive, we'd open them and key in all the details into a terminal. That bit was long-winded. I discovered the terminal keyboard has assignable shortcuts and set up a bunch of them for all the boilerplate such that keying in an item was about 6 keystrokes. Saved myself and my workmate hours every day, which we would spend pranking each other, other warehouse staff and staff at other sites. I had a manager in my 20s who detested the fact I turned a 2-hour process into a 15-minute process. It exposed how much lazier he was compared to me because when the higher-ups learned from other people at my level that I created the program, they took me aside and told me he took credit for it. They asked me how I felt about that. I told them what decisions they make regarding the manager's character is their decision. Just put yourselves in my shoes and consider it from that angle. They did nothing and I took the concept to a competitor who invested the money into making the program more robust and proprietary. My name was line 1 on the patent and trademark documents and I did well enough to semi-retire at 45. I credit Lee Iacocca for the inspiration. He went through a similar problem with higher-ups at Ford and his answer was to take his brain to Chrysler who would value it. Back in high school a lot of kids used to walk through his park to get home/to school. A portion of the path went into the woods because it was just quicker than walking the actual trail. At one point in the walk through the woods, you had to go up the small but tedious hill, nothing major but it took like 10 seconds of hard work to go up it. You couldn't go around because one side was a small cliff to the creek below and the other side had dense trees. One summer, a bunch of us got together and decided to just dig through that hill to make it flat. It took like 14 of us 3 good days to get through it. It was a hard 3 days, but it was definitely worth it. Saved 10 seconds of hill climbing every morning and afternoon, 150 plus days of the year. And it wasn't just us, but hundreds of other kids who had the same party every day. Sometimes you need to put in a lot of work so your future selves can enjoy the easy way out. I was invited to my friend's yearly apple picking. It was a full day of apples and kids and filling a truck for cider. I'm lazy and suggested we make the process more efficient with tarps on the ground. We managed in 2 hours what historically took all day. We didn't even get to the picnic lunch. Essentially, I ruined apple picking. I have a massive exercise to do at our year-end accountancy. My work previously got checked by another manager who spent over 3 weeks going over the data. Eventually she got shifted to another department and that workload fell on me, basically self-audit and then present the data to the actual auditors. My previous manager was absolutely bad at Excel. I didn't let on, but I did all the audit on a separate file using simple, but out-of-the-way, formulas. Not only did I reduce the task from 3 weeks to basically real-time checks, no time, but when I was told that I have to perform that exercise every month my job became a doddle. I didn't let on that everything was automated by SUMIFs, indexing, max values and range checks. Living the dream. Sorry if I rambled on. At work, I go through parts and apply 2 different kinds of tape and 2 different kinds of weave. I have finally got the rhythm down and now I do each part individually and apply everything at once. Everyone else goes through an entire order, just applying tape, then goes through it again to do the weave. I asked to use the big table in the back of the shop, and just put all the tape and weave tools there. And do the parts all at once. The normal rate for an 8-hour shift is 1,200, but I can manage 1,800 in a day, going at a nice steady pace. Edit, I can get 1,800 going at a steady pace. I've done it before. But I usually don't. Most days I go slow and relax, purposely only making 1,300 to 1,350 or so parts. It's just enough over rate to get my incentive bonus. And, thanks to being a hard and fast worker, the uppers leave me alone at my big table in the back. They look the other way when I have an earbud in one ear, and they don't notice that I scroll Reddit or read a lot. Edit, I can't say what products we make, they're too recognizable and Googling it would reveal where I work and live. I knew a guy who had a low-level data/reporting job. He had several daily/weekly work responsibilities, including a bunch of reports that needed quite a bit of tweaking from raw data to finished product. But like I said, low level. We didn't find out until way later, but he had set up macros for each of his major responsibilities where he could. Once set up, he'd just run the macros to do his work, but then he'd, smartly, hold off on delivering the reports until just a little before the deadlines. He'd hit every assignment and was seen as reliable. He also would complain about the workload so people would leave him with that work. I doubt he did a full hour of work a day after he set up what he did. Eventually he left the job for one with better pay. But he did work lazily. Also, he was smart not to reveal until the end, because had he told them about it he would have gotten a pat on the back and would have been given a whole other workload, on top of maintaining those macros/etc. Dude milked the job, not the other way around. I got fed up with handwriting itemized suborders at work, so I set up a spreadsheet that you can just fill out. Then I got tired of having more than one program open, and not being able to search within and among those order sheets, at least not automatically, or easily, so I'm having our FileMaker guy integrated into our greater ordering and invoicing system. I was frustrated at the pointlessness of sorting a giant pile of paper invoices from an unpaid stack to a paid stack every month, so I just used the accounting software to keep track. I became so irritated with having to fill out a multi-page, printed spreadsheet for every single order, sometimes just one item, 2 pages in, and frequently, there would be those pesky itemized suborders, that I condensed the items into most used, put them all on one easy-to-read sheet, and encouraged my coworker to simply write out the more uncommon items at the bottom. Basically, I hate busy work, and paper invariably leads to busy work. I have tried to reduce the use of paper in our office but have not been entirely successful. We have to have written order forms available, because sometimes the orders are coming in too fast to be able to type it all quickly and correctly, and have to keep some paper records for things like organic, FDA, and USDA audits, but overall, I'd say my absolute hatred of filing has reduced busy work here by at least half. Me. I automate all the time at work to make daily routine jobs easier. I write manuals with screenshots with arrows indicating where to click or where to fill in what. Whenever I write a manual, I assume that whoever reads it is a complete idiot so that whenever customers call for the same questions again, I just send them to the online manual I created. No need to type it out again by email or explain it again by phone. My boss put my name in for leading a project group shortly after I joined the company. I had no experience whatsoever with project managing, yet he still demanded that I lead the group of 12 people. All way smarter guys, tech background, these guys are like magicians for me, and with way more time at the company. I'm a business guy who's too dumb for balance sheets, that's why I'm an HR, and because I quite like the field the most. So, we started the first meeting. I asked for everyone's plan, experience, and ideas, gathered the different pros and cons, cross-checked with the budget we had, put on a time frame with milestones to reach, around 6 months, put in valuable people to consult at different steps. Why did I do that? Because I like organizing stuff and keeping everyone on the same page and delegating to-dos. Got promoted because of the success of the project. I asked my boss why he put me in for it since I never done anything like that. He said because I complained in the first week that most of the work has way too wonky a structure, no clear guidelines, and this could be improved heavily if we just take some time into it. And because I hated talking to others if I had questions and I wouldn't get a clear answer, like ask 10 people the same question and you get 15 different answers. Overall, this would make us way more efficient and keep everyone on the same page. All because I hated disorganized work.
Years ago, as a student I got a job stocking shelf. Guys were carrying the heavy boxes, put them on the floor, and bent each time to pick up the items to put on the shelves. I was maybe a light 100 pounds woman, and carrying the boxes was just killing me physically. So, one day I had an idea. I put the box on an old desk chair and rolled it around. No more carrying and no more bending. Funny thing is that, instead of doing the same thing, most of the guys called me lazy and kept carrying the heavy boxes. Just to prove how strong they were. Now they have special roller carts to do the job. This is a case of ask a lazy person for a solution to handling their work. I got sent out to California on a fact-finding mission about the marijuana growing industry, years ago, to see if there was a market for the sort of ANC work we do, automation and controls. I set up meetings with some of the local growers and met with them, discussed their outdoor grow operations. Their biggest complaint was having to go to the grow sites to do various tasks associated with maintaining the crop. I asked them, if we could provide a system that could allow you to manage those operations remotely from home, would you be interested in buying it? Every single guy was like, yeah, if I can do it from bed while smoking a spliff, I'd be totally on board for that. That's like my dream come true. So, it turns out some of the automation that was developed for that industry was marketed to the inherent laziness of stoners who have an entrepreneurial spirit. My brother gave my oldest nephew $10 a week if he did all his chores without needing to be told or complaining. One day he gets home early from work and sees the neighbor kid tossed a bag in the trash. He asks him what he is doing, and the kid says he gets $5 a week to take care of a few chores. My nephew outsourced his chores. Well, I worked in a graphics design studio as an intern. They mostly had me practice and do some basic stuff their head designers were too busy to do. One was a real estate ad. It had a few basic templates, but it was all kind of scatterbrained. I would spend 5 to 10 minutes trying to find the right layer for all the pictures and had to mess with way too much. So, I made copies of the files and made one for each template. I labeled everything, made it so the images on top of each other wouldn't clip into the lower ones like the previous did. So on. You could be in and out of the template in 2 to 3 minutes. Showed my boss the difference, and he had this face of well shit. He said the next day that if I was a graduate he'd hire me, because I was better than the people sending applications in. In short, I made an overly complicated / unorganized thing the opposite, and my boss was actually sad he couldn't hire me. I'm doing it right now, automated data cleaning in Python. My coworkers don't know about it, so something that takes me 10 minutes at most takes them 2 hours. Edit. For everyone who says I should share my code, I have. I even set up a private GitHub space for my team. Some have taken it up, but others, including management, do not like it. I think they feel a little threatened. A few years back my sister was doing some hardware testing and validation. She was working with a bunch of Excel tables. When she found out that I was doing some automatic XLS creating / editing for my job, she had me create a script for her job. 2 to 3 days of eye-killing boring work done in 20 seconds. She kept it a secret for a while. The worst task became the best task. She eventually shared it with the company as there were many others that did a similar job. And then she got promoted. In conclusion, her laziness helped with her promotion. My ex-boss gave me an Excel sheet. 124.000 rows Excel sheet. Had all the company customer data per row twice. In some of those duplicates there was an error. She needed me to go over the list one row by row to check for mistakes and mark all the faulty entries I could find. Through 124.000 rows. She wanted me to do that using the arrow down key and my mouse. I thanked her. I sat down. Invested half an hour into Google. Copy-pasted some parts of this formula, then some parts of that. Finally, I figured out the formula. I double-clicked the tiny rectangle so that the formula gets applied on all rows. Worked like a charm. I stood up, got myself a coffee, and talked to some colleagues. Then I went to my boss. She had anticipated that I would need 3 days for this task. When I was back less than an hour later, she thought I hadn't understood the task or maybe a follow-up question. I will never forget the expression on her face when I told her I was done. There were 6 faulty entries. There was a manufacturing plant that made toothpaste. One year for some reason, there ended up being an unusually high number of empty boxes being shipped out. So, in order to stop that from happening, the head of the company hired a couple engineers to develop a system to catch any empty boxes, so they didn't get shipped with the boxes that actually had the toothpaste tubes in them. The engineers developed a system that if the box weighed below a certain amount, the system would stop and a worker would have to go remove the box and start everything up again. The person in charge loved the idea and implemented it immediately. And right from the get-go, the number of empty boxes shipped dropped to near zero. The head of the company wanted to go see the system in action, so he goes and visits the plant one day and notices a huge fan right by the assembly line. Very confused as it wasn't hot, he asked the plant manager why the fan was there. The plant manager said the workers were tired of stopping what they were doing to remove an empty box, so they just hooked up a fan to blow the empty boxes off the scale before the system recognized it was empty and shut everything off. So, laziness led to a more efficient and cost-effective plan. Every year in the Canadian winter, power lines would fail due to the weight of the snow. It took many days to build up enough to break a line, so they employed a team to walk the routes and shake the poles to loosen the snow. One day they saw a bear shaking the poles and realized that if they could get the bear to do it, they wouldn't need to walk the route. So, they gave one guy a bucket of honey and he'd walk the route painting the sides of the poles with honey to attract the bears. It worked for a few more years, but this still takes a lot of time to do. So, then they had the idea of flying a helicopter along the route with a trained sniper with honey paintballs that he'd shoot the poles with. On its maiden flight, the helicopter passed the lines, and the downdraft blew away all of the snow. The flights continue to this day, but without the sniper. I worked with a guy, Ethan, who unfortunately was kind of scapegoated for the failure of a project, so was let go, but he was definitely capable. A year later the company I worked for was sold off and eventually shuttered. While looking for new work I spoke with a recruiter who had also worked with the Ethan, and he mentioned how he was trying to find him a new position too, as he had a contract job to digitize and update old mechanical drawings to the company's new software. Apparently, he wrote a bunch of macros and set up a workflow and was able to complete the work within a month even though the contract was for 6 months. The company let him go since the work was done and had no intentions of keeping him on. In construction environments, it's quite common to have a soft foreman/man underneath the actual person in charge. You basically find the individuals you know want to work their way up and give them components of the work, and however many people they need, they'll do it because oftentimes it means less physical work for them. You're still ultimately signing off on their work or settling debates/etc., which makes you the ultimate foreman or supervisor, but you know that you can assign the task and they'll let you know when it's done, and everyone is keeping the schedule in mind. I used to work in IT doing tech support for the employees. We didn't have a process for keeping track of what programs and hardware each employee PC used. So, if someone had to replace a PC, you had to remote into their old one to get their programs, shared folders, and hardware. If their old PC died, you had to hope they knew what they needed. I made an easy single-page sheet to track the user, the PC specs, programs, and hardware they use. Now you just need to copy what is on the sheet when setting up a new computer. I worked in a library, scanning incoming books into the system. This required a lot of transferring of piles of books from one station to another. My workmate constantly called me lazy because I would not get out of my chair while doing this job. I don't know how many times I had to explain, that's what wheelie chairs are for, and b. I was at least 3 times as fast as her at the same job, and this was in part because of the efficiency of not getting up out of my chair every 2 minutes. Before it was shut down entirely, I was able to privately tour the coal power plant in southeastern Virginia. At one point in the tour, the guide told me to watch out for a cord on the floor. The cord ran to a small, window air conditioning unit that was duct taped to a vent. Supposedly, one day the plant began to overheat, and the plant would have to be shut down in order to repair the malfunction. There are emergency reserves for situations like this, but the plant was overheating faster than they could switch it over. Someone at the plant had just purchased the AC unit and had it in the back of their vehicle. They ran and grabbed it, plugged it in, and pointed it into one of the vents. The amount of cool air it produced was enough to not only offset the overheating, but to also re-regulate the system, so instead of repairing the issue, they just fixed the AC in place, and let it run continuously until the day the plant shut down. Lastly, eat dinner out of the pot so there's fewer dishes to wash.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.